Okay, we need to talk about the Citadel DLC. So I've replayed the entire Mass Effect trilogy recently, doing so via the Legendary Edition on PS5 for a future video analyzing the story and narrative of Mass Effect Andromeda. This, needless to say, includes playing through all of the available DLC, including the Citadel. For those of you who don't know, the Citadel DLC is often considered to be the best piece of DLC ever released for Mass Effect 3, if not the entire trilogy. While I don't agree with this sentiment given that the Leviathan DLC exists, I can wholly understand where this comes from, because I too love it. The story is well crafted and well written, bringing back many fan favorite characters from across the trilogy, as well as a chance to reconnect with them in well constructed, thoughtful sequences. It takes us to new areas of the Citadel itself, as well as providing a new explorable hub, the Silver Sun Strip, which has many more things to do, see, and interact with, and isn't the same shade of fucking blue as the Presidium. It's fan service done right, a wonderful send-off for a beloved trilogy, one that is worthy of the praise that it has and continues to receive. There's just one problem, one that even the most ardent fans of this DLC would have a hard time defending. It's very tone deaf. Despite everything there is to love about it, there's a considerable tonal and narrative disconnect between the DLC and the rest of the game, one that could have gone against Bioware if the DLC wasn't nearly as good as it is. This disconnect doesn't ruin Mass Effect 3's overall narrative in any way, and can be ignored with a generous application of triviality, with some of the game's funniest moments originating from the DLC. While some of the series' more tropic elements and long-running gags are brought to light in an often humorous fashion. Once you dig into it, however, you'll begin to see the disconnect, one that I believe was far from intentional but hard to miss. It's this disconnect that will be the subject of this video, going through the Citadel's narrative elements and seeing how it fits into Mass Effect 3 and the trilogy as a whole. As such, I will only speak about gameplay when and where it's applicable, appropriate, or otherwise unavoidable. With that said, spoiler warning for the entire DLC and portions of the original trilogy. Let's start this already potentially controversial video with an overview of the DLC's story because it kicks off immediately once you start it. In fact, you won't be able to access the rest of the DLC until you've completed it. To do that, you'll have to have completed Priority Citadel 2, the attempted server's coup to overthrow the Council, aided by Counselor Asshat Udina, which becomes available after you've cured the Krogan genophage. Or not. Once that's out of the way, you'll receive an email from Admiral Hackett ordering the Normandy into dry dock on the Citadel for repairs. With the Alliance having an assigned army of techs to do the job, the crew is ordered to take shore leave and get some much needed rest. Hackett then ends the email by stating that Anderson has an apartment down in the wards and that Shepard is to head there upon arrival. Arriving at the apartment, we're contacted by Anderson from Earth, who straight up gives Shepard the apartment, tying up a loose end while simultaneously providing the commander a nice place to lay their head between Reaper or Cerberus-filled escapades. Once Anderson hangs up, we receive an email from Joker asking Shepard to come by some fancy Dan sushi place to talk some things over. Leaving the apartment, we're treated to a cutscene that shows off the hub area of the Silver Sun Strip, though as mentioned earlier, we're going to have to wait a bit before we can sink our teeth into it. Arriving at the fancy Dan sushi place, so fancy it has a French guy at the door, we're immediately allowed in, seeing that Joker has already gotten a table. Shepard and Joker converse for a bit before Joker asks what Shepard's email was all about. Except Shepard got an email from Joker, not the other way around. Weird. It's here that an Alliance officer, staff analyst Maya Brooks, appears out of nowhere and informs Shepard that someone's been trying to hack into his stuff. Personnel records, comms, the works. Suddenly, as if on cue, dun dun dun, a group of heavily armed mercs appear, knock out French guy at the door, shoot up shit, and take Brooks hostage, all with the express intent of looking for and killing Shepard. After sending Joker away to get the rest of the crew, Shepard attempts to escape, nearly succeeding until more mercs show up. Brooks is shot, and eventually the fish tank that makes up the floor of the sushi bar, because that's such a brilliant idea, explodes after being shot one too many times, and Shepard falls through before making a hard landing. We're now given the objective of finding a way out, eventually agreeing to meet Brooks, who somehow survived getting shot, at a nearby Skycar lot, where Shepard orders Brooks to send a C-Sec shuttle. Along the way, we get into more gunfights with the mercs and make contact with our love interest, in this instance, Ashley.
You scared me there. Joker explained what happened. I'm on foot, but not far.
And Garrus.
Is it some kind of alarm? What's going on?
I thought I'd make things more interesting.
Of course you did.
Reaching the Skycar lot is where we meet up with our chosen waifu or husbando. The C-Sec shuttle then arrives, except it's been hijacked by the mercs. It's here that Rex, should he survive your encounter on Vermeer 2 whole games ago, miraculously appears out of nowhere, takes down the shuttle and the mercs, before just casually joining in on the ruckus. The rest of the mission involves simply waiting for Joker and Brooks to arrive with the shuttle, while fending off waves of mercs. Once the shuttle arrives, you hop on and fly away back to your apartment.
Someone want to tell me what's going on here?
At the apartment, we begin to plan our next move. Liara shows up and begins to investigate the origins of the silenced pistol you pick up. Using her capabilities as shadow broker, she's able to trace it to a man named Elijah Khan, a casino owner and weapon smuggler. She was also able to get a hold of a recording of a call made by Khan right after the attack on the sushi place. In it, he speaks to someone using an ID disguiser, our identity thief, and the buyer of the gun. In the call, Khan's less than pleased that his merchandise has ended up on the evening news and cuts off all contact with the thief. Seeing an opportunity, it's agreed that they need to get whatever information Khan has. Only issue is that Khan has gone to ground, most likely in the casino's panic room, which means they'll have to get in somehow. It just so happens that the casino is hosting a charity event to assist war refugees that same evening. Using Glyph, Liara purchases some tickets, then brings up a layout of the casino. There's an air shaft that bypasses security and ends up in a storage room where the panic room security can be disabled. Only issue is that it's bound to be riddled with its own security measures. Liara may have countermeasures that could help, but will only know once they're inside. All that's left is to decide who will go in the shaft. Brooks is given this role, with Shepard and their chosen +1 being tasked with assisting however they can from within the casino itself. What follows is the casino sequence itself, which in gameplay terms is both boring and annoying in equal measure. Basically, all you do is mingle with your fellow guests or partake in the casino's games, such as Quasar, Roulette, and live Varen racing. You'll be interrupted a few times throughout by Brooks, who will need a security measure disabled, done by hacking a panel, often in view of a security camera, the panel of which to disable often is in view of a guard. So begins an awkward scenario of distracting a guard while you disable the camera so you can then disable whatever security measure Brooks needs taken down. After all that, we finally reach the panic room where we find Khan. Except he's already dead, because of course he is. Shepard accesses his terminal's comm, which allows us to call the identity thief and have a chat. The thief doesn't linger long and disappears, too quickly for Brooks to run a trace. Still, we take the wiped data drives for EDI to look through, hoping that something can be pulled from them. Back at the apartment, EDI and Brooks manage to pull an encrypted communication from the data drives, detailing acquisitions made by the mercs, namely weapons and combat mechs.
It appears this drone is preparing to rebel.
Glyph then appears and notifies the crew that it picked up Shepard's Spectre access code in use at the Citadel archives, along with the archives going into emergency lockdown. This means that our identity thief is there right now. With no time to lose, the crew heads off to the archives with all hands on deck for this mission. Though not before dealing with the Volus pizza delivery guy. Good one, James. Arriving at the archives, we blast our way in through the roof given that the front entrance isn't an option. We immediately split off with our chosen squad while the others break up into 2 more teams. Entering the archives, we're quickly greeted by the mercs and a firefight ensues. This is brought to a swift end when Brooks is somehow taken hostage. It's here that our mysterious villain, the one we've been tracking from the beginning, makes his entrance.
Hi. I'm Commander Shepard. I never hide.
Yeah, it's a clone. Listen, I'm not the biggest fan of the evil clone trope, but at least the writers made sure it fit within the realm of Mass Effect probability. You see, the clone was obviously made using Shepard's DNA during the Lazarus project, but only for spare parts.
In case you needed another arm, or a heart, or a lung.
And was then quickly discarded by the Elusive Man once he had the real Shepard. As crazy as it may seem initially, compared to some of the utterly fucked up shit that the Elusive Man is behind, some of which we haven't seen yet in this game, making a clone of Shepard for spare parts is child's play. Having only woken up 6 months earlier and angry at being forgotten while Shepard played hero, surrounded by what he calls a cult, the clone decided that he wanted to take over Shepard's life. The conversation ends with the clone ordering the Normandy to prepare for takeoff before ordering Shepard and the others' execution, all while heading deeper into the archives. Of course, Shepard and the gang escape and after another firefight pursue the clone. The archives are a massive repository of the Citadel's history, most of it top secret. In between combat sections, you can find holograms detailing specific moments in the Citadel's history. This is by far the most interesting part of the story, yet also one of the most disappointing as it pertains to the entire series, something that we'll get into in a short bit. Towards the end, we hear that Brooks is in trouble. Spotting her, we rush to her aid, only to become trapped in one of the archives' vaults. It's here that we meet with the clone again and learn that staff analyst Maya Brooks is behind the whole goddamn thing.
I wouldn't know. I don't actually work for them.
Okay, let's dig into this. Brooks was never Alliance, but Cerberus, or at least she used to be. She was the one who put together all the dossiers we get back in Mass Effect 2. She ended up leaving Cerberus due to disagreements with the Illusive Man, chief among them the fact that Cerberus, a pro-human organization, was turning to aliens for help. Waiting for a chance to strike, she discovered the clone, woke them up, and together began making their plans. This ultimately resulted in the events leading up to this moment as explained in this scene. Ultimately, all they want is Shepard's Spectre code, the key to his entire life. For that, they need to swap out Shepard's handprint for the clones. For all the things that are similar, their handprints aren't one of them. For life, not DNA, is what gives it shape. Swapping out handprint scans, the clone now has full access to Shepard's Spectre authority. With that taken care of, Brooks and the clone head for the Normandy, leaving Shepard and their squad to be whisked away into their new vault-turned cell to wait out a long death. Though not before this.
I should go.
Thankfully for Shepard, Glyph is still hanging around and successfully managed to get them out of the vault and find the rest of the crew. So begins a race against the clock to get to the Normandy before the clone and the mercs take off with it. Hopping in a skycar with Joker, they head for the docks. Getting as close as they can, Shepard and the chosen squad fight their way across the docks. Along the way, the mercs fire up the Normandy's engines, making their dash across the docks a little more desperate. Eventually, they reach the ship's airlock where a bewildered and rightfully upset trainer berates Shepard, the clone having fired her. Shepard proceeds to set the record straight. Sort of.
That's a Cision Pro Mark IV. It uses Mass Effect fields to break up plaque and massage the gums.
Yes, I told you that.
And I remember, because I'm the real Shepard.
And someone just threw me off the ship. If it wasn't you...
Shepard's got a clone. Makes sense when you think about it.
I can explain more later. For now...
The clone has sealed the Normandy, meaning they'll need another way in. Trainer mentions an emergency hatch, but it's manually locked and only meant to be opened from the other side. It's here that Garrus has an idea, and Trainer has the solution. With that, Shepard and the gang manage to sneak onto the Normandy just before it takes off. Their entrance, however, has triggered an alert. Though it isn't immediately apparent, the clone knows it's Shepard's and decides to head down to the shuttle bay to wait, the mercs order to merely slow him down. This ultimately leads to Shepard and the gang getting into a quick firefight on the CIC, followed by a slow elevator ride to the hangar, a callback to the notoriously awful elevator rides of the original Mass Effect 1. Arriving at the hangar begins our final showdown with the clone.
Well, that's creepy.
This is by far the longest continuous combat sequence in the entire DLC, and the most difficult, the clone concept being taken beyond the superficial to the straight up literal, the clone having the exact same ability set as you dependent on your chosen class. The clone will be aided by Brooks, who's soft as goddamn 10-ply, as well as intermittent waves of mercs. About midway through, Joker and Cortez appear with a skycar and fly directly in front of the Normandy, preventing it from jumping to FTL, all while avoiding fire from the ship itself. The mercs send out a shuttle to take care of them, something that's never brought up again, along with the gangway being mysteriously left open. This eventually leads to the climax of the battle, where Shepard wrestles the clone and the two tumble down the gangway towards its edge, high above one of the Citadel's wards. They inevitably end up hanging off said edge. Shepard's squad come to his rescue while Brooks leaves the clone to their fate. Shepard then has a choice, help the clone, or give them a swift boot.
You. Get off my ship.
Just as an aside, even though I don't have any footage, if you try to save the clone, they just end up killing themselves out of spite, making this choice rather meaningless. The story comes to a close with Brooks' capture, where you, in a roundabout way, decide what happens to her, followed by the Normandy returning to dock, and the crew finally able to take a proper shore leave.
Come on. Maybe we can take some actual time off. No explosions or anything. Just us.
Don't know about no explosions, but just us sounds perfect.
Okay, now that we've finished overly summarizing the DLC story, let's get to the crux of this video, that of the DLC's tone deafness. Yes, I know the party at the end is technically part of the story, but I'm saving it for a later section since some of the DLC's glaring narrative problems permeate from just its mere existence. Now let me be clear one more time. I've thoroughly enjoyed the Citadel DLC every time I've played it, even on this current run. As mentioned earlier, it's fan service done right. If you're going to do something of that nature, this is the DLC to use as a blueprint. In a vacuum, it's brilliant, which may seem a strange statement given that much of its fan service elements draw from the entire trilogy, even as far back as Mass Effect 1. I say that, however, because it's best viewed in that vacuum, separate from the rest of Mass Effect 3 and the series as a whole. When placed within the context of the original trilogy is where problems begin to arise. Let's start with when we first meet the mercs at the sushi bar. This shouldn't be possible. Like at all. Remember, this takes place after the Cerberus coup attempt, and you see walking around the Presidium that security is tighter as a result. With that in mind, I find it hard to believe that heavily armed and armored mercs would just be allowed to waltz around, presumably one of the wealthier sections of the wards we happen to be in. It would have made more sense if they simply burst in out of nowhere, remaining undetected right up until the moment of contact. Instead, it appears that they just meandered down the street, guns and armor a-glittering for all to see. And no one thought to alert CSEC or any of the Council militaries? The same can be said about the numerous gunfights that take place afterwards. Why did no one call CSEC or any of the Council militaries? There are Alliance, Turian, Asari, and Solarian soldiers everywhere on the Citadel. Surely a general call to arms for any personnel in the vicinity would have been put out. Yes, CSEC puts the whole place under lockdown, but that's the extent of it. You can't even say the comms are jammed because how else would you hear from your chosen romance and Garrus? Point of fact, there is no explanation given for how this was managed, which is strange considering that nearly everything else in the story has some sort of explanation. Let's jump ahead in the story to the Citadel archives. As mentioned before, the archives are the most interesting part of the story, but also the most frustrating. It's where, as mentioned before, you come across various holograms detailing important moments in the history of the Mass Effect universe. Some of them are moments that are mentioned but don't play an important role with regards to the overall narrative of the trilogy. Some shape entire subplots, and a few pertain directly to Shepard. They're interesting little tidbits that build on the already brilliantly written and implemented lore of the Mass Effect universe, providing extra context and may even raise questions. And they're never commented on. Not once. One of the holograms details the moment the Turians used the genophage on the Krogan to end the rebellions. A dark chapter in galactic history, though we learn from the hologram that the Solarians, the species who made it, may not have been so keen to use it. This is important information when you consider how the Krogan view these two species, especially the Solarians. The fact that there was hesitancy on the part of the genophage's original progenitors to use it is monumental in how we view the genophage and its effects on the Krogan, along with the fact that the Turians just went ahead and used it, possibly without consulting their allies first. I had Garrus and Rex with me for this, and neither of them commented on this. Garrus Vicarian, Primarch Victus' confidant and Reaper expert, and Ernod Rex, the head honcho of all Krogan, apparently have nothing to say about this. I call bullshit, but the DLC says otherwise. How about this one? The first hologram you come across is that of a human taken prisoner by the Turians during the First Contact War, when humans made first contact with alien life, and the Turians were the enemy. Again, I had Garrus with me, and he had nothing to say. This one's a bit minor given that earlier we enter a vault that contains a rifle used from that war, and it's here that Garrus makes some sort of comment, but still, here we are witnessing an important piece of galactic history and neither Garrus, or even Shepard for that matter, had anything to say. I could go on all day, so I'm going to end this bit with what I consider to be the most egregious example here, and it's that of the hologram detailing the Battle of the Citadel at the end of Mass Effect 1. You see, it begins with the official narrative, the one vociferously asserted by the Council I saved on this run, that the Geth and Saren were solely responsible for the attack, making no mention of the Reapers, that Sovereign was just a Geth dreadnought. That is, until Shepard's Spectre status is recognized.
Interrupting. Spectre status recognized. Commander Shepard. The following information is classified.
The unknown aggressor is suspected to be a Reaper aided in its attack on the Citadel by rogue Spectre Saren. The Reaper Sovereign is destroyed by the Fifth Fleet.
So, based on this hologram, the Council actually did believe Shepard's warnings of the Reapers and their existence. So much so, it seems, that they made a point of updating official Citadel records. Yes, highly classified, away from the public eyes, but still. By all accounts, they believed Shepard. And yet, despite that, continued to state the exact opposite, directly to Shepard's face, saying that they were played a fool by Saren and by Cerberus, borderline calling him crazy. All while this little tidbit sits in a vault in the Citadel archives. I'm willing to admit that this could have been updated after the initial Reaper invasion, but Shepard wouldn't know that. As they see it, this is years of vindication and frustration thrown together in one short holographic excerpt. Surely Shepard or any one of his squadmates would have something to say about this right now. Nope, nothing. Not a goddamn peep. Years of frustration and vindication rolled into one right before their eyes, and no one says a word. Not even a grunt in acknowledgement. This is why I said earlier that I find the archives the most interesting and yet most frustrating part of this story. The addition of the holograms coupled with their audio was a brilliant narrative choice, further enriching the already rich lore of the Mass Effect universe. At the same time, it's mind-boggling that no one acknowledges what's being presented. These are historical moments whose importance transcends well beyond the scope of the entire trilogy, and they're just ignored. Instead, we get cringe-inducing jokes from the peanut gallery over comms.
Attention, low-life mercenary wannabes. Say please, and we'll accept your surrender.
Say pretty please, and maybe Rex will take a break.
Try it, and we'll see.
Debrothean, on the other hand, makes no such promises.
Okay, I'm getting heated, so let's set aside the story for now and take a gander at the wider DLC beyond. Once you complete the story, you're free to explore all that the Silver Sun Strip has to offer. While not exactly gargantuan in size, this is made up for by the sheer amount of activities you can partake in. There's the aforementioned casino, where you can go and play all of the same games you could have during the story mission there, including Quasar, which I found way too addicting at times. There's Castle Arcade, which is exactly as the name would suggest. Last but not least, there's the Armax Arsenal Arena, a combat simulator, where you can earn tokens towards awards and combat modifiers, as well as complete challenges sent by fans and sponsors. There's also some Vorcha just outside the arena running a 3-card Monty game who make me crack up every time I come across them.
You play easy. Fight, lady.
Sprinkled throughout are various encounters with current and former crew members, which are obtained by completing missions outside the DLC tied to said character.
Specialist?
Commander?
Kick her ass.
Roger that.
These encounters, which can be triggered by receiving an email, can either take place in Shepard's apartment or somewhere out on the strip. These interactions either play on previous moments in the story or certain quirks about the particular character you're with. They're among my favorite character moments in the entire game, though not all are created equal, as a few just kind of feel forced, unnecessary, or straight up terrible and pain-inducing. I'm looking at you, Tali. All in all, the Silver Sun Strip, with its activities and character interactions, is a well-realized part of the wards, and by far my favorite part of the Citadel in Mass Effect 3. And yet I can't help but feel that something's off. It's too relaxed.
Wait, what?
Let me explain, because after everything I've just said, that last statement won't make much sense just now, though if you're still watching this video, you're probably thinking everything I've said so far is pretty out of pocket. Let's go back to what I said when we discussed the mercs at the sushi bar. The DLC takes place after the Cerberus coup attempt. What's made clear in the immediate aftermath is that the Citadel is suddenly on edge. War, be it with the Reapers or Cerberus, has finally arrived. The heart of galactic civilization is no longer safe, no longer quarantined from it all. This brings about a dramatic shift in tone, one that's been slowly building since our initial arrival since fleeing Earth and visiting Mars, then brought to fruition by Cerberus' attempted coup. People are scared, there's a run on the banks, war profiteering and hoarding of supplies is rampant, weapon sales are through the roof, and the refugee crisis at the docks as a result of the rapid Reaper advance is only getting worse. The Citadel has finally woken up, and you can feel that tension as you run around the Presidium. Then you get to the Silver Sun Strip, and it's like none of that is happening. Reapers? Haha, squid machines as tall as skyscrapers? Haha, so funny. Cerberus? Oh, haha, silly human nationalists. Oh, what's that now? The elusive men sticking Reaper tech inside his men's skulls? Haha, what a silly goose. Okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but you get the idea. There's a deliberate tonal shift in the way the Citadel and its ecosystem behaves after the coup, yet that hasn't been transposed onto the Silver Sun Strip. As far as it's concerned, the invasions of Earth and Palaven may as well be in another galaxy, and the Reapers, literal cosmic horrors come to life, might as well just be flies on the wall, or figments of our imagination. There's a noted lack of seriousness that permeates the DLC. As said before, if you view it in a vacuum and for what it is, as fan service, then there's no problem. However, it's difficult to view it in said vacuum since the rest of Mass Effect 3's story takes itself seriously right until the end. This also goes for the other story DLC. From Ashes, Omega, and Leviathan all maintain this narrative and tonal consistency. Citadel bucks this, and it sticks out like a sore thumb for it. This results in it being incredibly jarring every time you come to the strip, especially if you do so immediately after completing an emotionally taxing or stressful mission, particularly late in the story, such as Thessia or Horizon. One minute you're seeing millions getting slaughtered by the Reapers. Next minute, you're playing a drinking game with Ashley before beating up some knuckleheads at the casino bar, happy as a clam all the while. One minute, you're deciding the fate of 2 entire species. Next minute, you're watching Bioware with the boys, not a care in the world for what's just happened. The DLC is tone deaf. Do you see what I mean? And we haven't even gotten to the party yet. So, with that said, let's dive into the creme de la creme of the entire DLC.
Runt, keep up the good work.
Will do. I told you already. No!
The party in Shepard's apartment forms the extended conclusion of the DLC story. After you've gotten the Normandy back, you return to Shepard's apartment with Joker and Rex. It's here that our lovable helmsman suggests that we throw a party, though were I in their shoes, I'd personally roll with Shepard's idea. You can either agree to it or simply say that you'll think about it. Either way, you'll receive a new objective to purchase party supplies from the casino bar. Once you've done that, you can invite who you'd like, then speak to Glyph to start, deciding what kind of party you want to have right beforehand. Party is where much of the DLC's celebratory and fan service elements come into play. This is the only time in the entire trilogy that all crew members, past and present, barring a few exceptions, are together in one space and are not actively fighting or on a mission. It's a rightfully light-hearted experience, full of nostalgia, reflection, and hilarious moments which get better as the night wears on. The party takes place over 3 phases. In each phase, you can interact with different groups of partygoers scattered throughout the apartment. Things start off relatively calm, though begin to ramp up over these subsequent phases, especially if you choose the more rowdy option prior to kicking off festivities. It eventually ends with a group photo of everyone present, followed by waking up with your chosen romance, some hungover interactions, before a touching scene where everyone gazes out at the Normandy, with Shepard again sharing a moment with their chosen romance, reminiscing on the time spent aboard probably the most recognizable ship in video games. With that, the story of the Citadel is brought to a heartwarming close, the perfect send-off. It epitomizes everything that is great about the DLC and the trilogy as a whole, especially from a narrative perspective. Yet simultaneously, it also epitomizes many of the lingering narrative issues that plague the DLC should you view it beyond that goddamn vacuum I keep mentioning. Case in point, the utter lack of seriousness we discussed earlier comes right to the fore here. This can be seen on the macro and micro level, the latter being found in some of the dialogue that takes place. You are Commander Shepard, the greatest hero the galaxy has ever seen, who has had to make some truly difficult decisions, face down almost impossible odds, and these decisions are never brought up. Ever. This is most glaring when you do a renegade run, but even if you go down the Paragon path, this can still be an issue. How about the decision on Vermeer to save either Ashley or Caden? On this run, I saved Ashley, as you can see, but at no point is Caden ever mentioned during the party, despite the fact his death is brought up a few times elsewhere throughout the series, especially in Mass Effect 3. What about the decision at the end of the first game, to save the Council or human lives? In this run, I saved the Council, sacrificing hundreds if not thousands of human lives and ships. Those ships and personnel could have made a difference in the war against the Reapers, however marginal, but Shepard decided the Council was more important. This is a huge decision that Shepard made, one that has a tangible effect on the story and possible outcome of the trilogy going forward. Surely this is something that would come up during the nope, not once, not even in passing. How about this one? Arrival from Mass Effect 2. No, the player doesn't get to decide whether or not to send that asteroid into the Alpha Relay, but the point remains. Shepard made a decision, an incredibly difficult one that delayed the Reaper invasion, but at the cost of over 300,000 Batarian lives. It's a decision that is brought up multiple times over the course of Mass Effect 3. Hell, it's the reason you're under house arrest at the start of the damn game, assuming you played Arrival beforehand and have carried over that save. But no, not a single peep or inkling of a mention is made about it at the party. I could go on and on, but the outcome is always the same. You could have been a walking reincarnation of Lucifer himself and none of it will be brought up. If an aspect of the party is meant to be a chance to reflect on your past deeds, then this sequence needs to be narratively consistent with that and not cherry pick. I'm not suggesting that they need to involve everyone, gathered in a circle like some group therapy session, but it could have been done in some private conversations with your most trusted squad mates, or characters that have been around the longest, such as Liara, or Garrus, or even your chosen romance, with varying dialogue depending on your choices. Speaking of conversations, there's a few instances where they make light of a few moments throughout the series that they really probably shouldn't, at least in my opinion. Take this one from Joker, for example.
It's one system over from where we hooked some guy up to the Geth, who then got loose and killed all our guys.
For those of you who don't know, that's a reference to Project Overlord from Mass Effect 2. I won't go in depth on it here, but needless to say, it's one of, if not the most gut-wrenching and heartbreaking storylines in the entire series. and here's Joker making light of it.
It's one system over from where we hooked some guy up to the Geth, who then got loose and killed all our guys.
I understand that it's only a small part of a larger joke about Cerberus, but even still, it really rubbed me the wrong way, for frankly, there's nothing particularly funny about Project Overlord.
It all seemed harmless.
Alright, now that we've discussed the micro issues with the party in way too much detail, let's dive into the macro, as it's from this that many of the issues on the micro come into play, and it all stems from one simple fact. The party shouldn't even be happening in the first place.
Wait, what?
Let's dig into this, as this requires a bit of setup to make sense. As mentioned before, the DLC can be started at the earliest, right after the Cerberus coup attempt, with the cutoff being the attack on Cerberus headquarters right before the attack on Earth at the end. The DLC itself can be started any time in between those two missions, meaning there's no real urgency to start it right away. However, there's a caveat to this. Depending on when you start it, you may not have all potential squad mates available, depending on whether you've completed certain side missions before then, or on certain decisions you've made. The same goes for the party, but in a much more noticeable way. You won't be able to invite several of your potential guests if you haven't completed their necessary side missions or have reached the conclusions of the respective storylines, a la Miranda, or Samara, or Grunt for example. That's also assuming they survive, because if you've played Mass Effect 3, you know that no one is truly safe. For this reason, if you look it up online, nearly every publication or player will tell you not to start the DLC, or the party at the very least, until just before the run on Cerberus HQ, as this is the moment when everyone possible will be available, again depending on your decisions and actions. Narratively, in a way, having the party towards the very end of the game makes sense, given the very last scene with everyone looking out at the Normandy before heading aboard. Unfortunately, that's about it, because this could be, quite possibly, the worst time to be having a party. Think about it. What precedes the Cerberus HQ? Horizon, where we're in a desperate search for Kai Lang, who stole Vendetta, the Prothean VI that knows what the Catalyst is, the missing piece of the Crucible, from us on Thessia, where we witness the fall of a sorry civilization in real time. This puts us in a desperate race against time to find the Catalyst. But no, let's stop and have a party, get wasted on horse choker, do target practice at the bar, reminisce on the good old days, haha, nostalgia funny moments. Nothing like getting blitzed when the literal fate of galactic civilization's at stake, huh lads? Before you say, then have the party sooner, the same issue arises no matter when you do it. Can you imagine having the party right after Thessia, when you should be hunting down Lieutenant Bastard Kai Lang? Have it before that, or any major plot moment, and you won't have every available guest you can invite. It just doesn't fit anywhere in Mass Effect 3's story, and it's all thanks to the tonal and narrative disconnect that permeates it, and the entire DLC if we're being honest. It's tone deaf. Can you see it now?
I don't want to talk about it.
The Citadel DLC is excellent. A bold statement, I know, given all my criticisms, but it's one that I truly believe. There's a reason it's beloved by fans of the series, as it achieves everything that it set out to do, to be a celebration of everything that is the original Mass Effect trilogy. As mentioned way back at the beginning, it's fan service done right, and a wonderful send-off to a cast of characters we've come to know and love over the course of 3 games. It's just unfortunate that it requires a necessary suspension of reality as it pertains to the trilogy as a whole, viewed in a vacuum, isolated from everything else. If not, the tonal and narrative disconnect becomes apparent and difficult to ignore. Bioware hit the nail on the head with this DLC, only that nail is rather crooked and too deep to be removed. Though not my favorite piece of content for Mass Effect 3, I'm happy the Citadel DLC exists, and I look forward to playing it again in the future. It's just a damn shame I'll never be able to truly see it for what it is ever again.